What's up, everybody? This is our most recent flip that we completed in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Just closed on it. It's been a year-long process, longest flip, largest scope of work that we've done so far. But it turned out really nice. I'll show you around, and then we can go back to the shop and we'll break down the numbers, see how well we did on this one, and then talk about some learning lessons that came from this deal. So stay tuned. What's up, everybody? We're back at the shop, and we're gonna break this deal down. But first, I wanna give you a little bit of context on how we acquired this deal. And so I've got a group of appointment setters that work with me, building relationships with agents in the area for flip opportunities. And so this deal was one of those. It was actually a pocket listing. And if you're unfamiliar with what a pocket listing is, this is when a homeowner wants to sell a property, they engage with a realtor to sell, but they don't want to put it on market. And so the situation with these sellers was, it was an older couple. They had bought this home in the late 90s, had lived in this home for about 30 years, raised their families, did all those things. They have now since retired and bought a condo at the beach, and this house was sitting vacant. There was lots of deferred maintenance. They had done nothing as far as repairs to the roof, the windows, the floor, the HVAC, all that stuff was original. But it was in a really highly desirable neighborhood in Chapel Hill. And so they wanted to sell, but they didn't want to put it on market and show the current condition, just because it would have been pretty embarrassing for that type of clientele that lived in that neighborhood to see the condition of the property. And so they had reached out to their agent and said, hey, we want to sell, but we do not want to put this on market. Do you have any investors that might be interested? And so they reached out to one of my setters. His name's Tyler. He brought the deal to us. He got paid a fee for bringing that deal to us. And so if that's something that you're interested in, you can go to my website. It's adamsbuybox.com. You can fill out a form to join the team. Would love to have you. But to continue with this, we brought the deal, and the numbers were, they wanted $700,000 for the house. But after hearing from the agent all the repairs that were necessary, I told him, like, hey, look, the most I could ever pay for a house like this is $625. but don't quote me on that. I'm still gonna need to come out with my contractor and get some estimates before I can really give you my highest and best offer. And so we scheduled a time to go out there, we walked it, and my contractor told me, yeah, this is every bit of 200,000, maybe even more. This house was over 3,000 square feet and needed everything. New roof, new HVAC, new windows, new floors, plumbing, the whole nine needed to be touched. And so we were sitting down with the sellers, and I basically gave them two options. I said, hey, if you guys want this to be a smooth, clean transaction, come in all cash, I'll cover closing costs, I'll cover your agent commissions. I'm gonna be at 510. And even at that number, I'm nervous because we haven't dug into the walls yet. I can easily see this is at least $200,000 of work, probably more, and a lot of time that it's gonna take to do this. But if you wanna be done, you can be done. I can pay you that $625 that I mentioned on the phone, but the only way that I'm gonna be able to do that is if I flip the house first. And so they're like, okay, how do we do that? And so I explained to them that, hey, I can give you a down payment on your equity. I can cover your agent commissions for you, so you're not out of pocket any money. I'll take over the debt on the house, and then we'll renovate the home. And once we sell, you'll get the rest of your equity. And so if you're willing to wait out this time frame, which we were expecting about 6 to 8 months on this deal, you're gonna make an extra $115,000. And so I always love structuring deals like this because I have to bring a lot less money to the table. I can obviously pay the sellers more money if they're willing to wait. And so it's a true win-win for both parties. And so with them already living at the beach, this house being vacant, and they're making payments on a house they no longer live in, it made a ton of sense for them to wait to really maximize their equity. And so we got into the deal, we agreed on that $625 purchase price. And so we gave them 10% down on their equity, which is about $60,000. And then I paid the agent commissions, which was around $18,000. And then closing costs was a couple thousand. So we'll just run it up to $80,000 to get into the deal. And then we were projecting around $200,000 in renovations and a 6 to 8 month time frame. And so ARV on this house was 1.2 million. All in from a cash perspective, what we were projecting was $825,000. So we're looking at about a $250,000 spread on this house after closing costs, commissions, paying back our lenders, all that good stuff. And so this looked like an amazing deal for us. And so this was our first big luxury flip and something at such a large scope of work. And so I wanted to leverage some of my friends that have been focusing on more luxury properties. And I'm always looking to collaborate with more people and utilize their skill sets. And so I approached these two guys and said, hey, I've got this deal. I've structured it on some really great terms. Would you want to partner on it? We'll bring some money. You bring some money. You bring your skill set. I'll bring whatever else you need. And we'll split the profit on the back end. And they said, yeah, that sounds great. So we got into the deal and started work. And so we were initially intending this to be a 6 to 8 month project. It did not work out that way. There was lots of problems on this deal, and we'll get into that shortly. But that was the structure, right? And so we started the demo process and quickly got shut down because I was unaware that Chapel Hill requires you to submit all of your permits even for demo, which is not common in most areas here in North Carolina. At least in the stuff that we had done in the past, we had never run into that issue. And so that added an additional probably a month of carrying costs right off the rip. And so once we got all of our permits approved and got our contractor involved to start the renovation process, then we got into it. We didn't use my normal GC on this job just because it was a higher price point and definitely a limited mindset from me. And a learning lesson on this one is that there's always other subcontractors that do a little bit better fit and finish that my GC could have brought to the table. But for my lack of experience on this type of deal structure, we wanted to bring in a different contractor who had experience on these luxury properties. So we brought one in, but unfortunately the tradesman that he hired to do the job was pretty shoddy work, especially for a $1.2 million purchase price. And so we had to do some rework, get it up to snuff for this price point. And so there was some additional cost there. Another issue that we ran into was one of the partners that we brought in decided to change the scope of work several times during the project without notifying me, which was definitely an issue that added time delay, added additional cost to our budget, and didn't really bring the return that we were expecting for adding that additional cost. So that was frustrating, and another learning lesson that having proper expectations with your partners, that everyone that's involved in the deal needs to make the decision on scope of work changes and hiring and firing contractors. So we're definitely tightening that up on future deals. And so just to kind of break down the numbers, what we were initially looking at was a $200,000 rehab with a 6 to 8 month time frame, right, to make about $250,000 in profit. And what the real numbers ended up being was this project took 14 months to finish, so more than double the time frame that we were expecting. And our budget was actually, or rather the cost to do this job ended up being $350,000. So $150,000 over what we were projecting, with all the delays, all the additional carrying costs, the scope of work changes, all that stuff just ate into our profit like crazy. So at the end of the day, when we closed, we did sell for 1.2 million like we intended. It took a lot longer. We brought the house on market in a slow season, and it sat a little bit longer than we intended it to, but such is life. That happens in real estate all the time. And so what we actually ended up making as a profit was closer to like 95,000. And so still a good profit. We didn't lose money, but the difference between what we were expecting to make and what we actually made was huge. It was a third of what we should have made, right? And so there was definitely mistakes along the way, and this was definitely a learning lesson on this deal as far as bringing in the right contractors, having the right agreements with partners that you're going to do business with, and staying on top of your timelines and your budgets. And so it was still a win. The sellers made a lot more money than they would have with a cash offer. So now they're set up for their retirement, and they're going to have a lot more money to spend. We still made a good profit, even though it took a lot longer than we had intended, and there was definitely some opportunity cost from deals that we missed out on just because we had so much leveraged on this deal. But I think the beauty of this deal is that because we structured it creatively, we were still able to make almost a 6-figure return on a deal that took twice as long as what we had initially intended. And so if I would have bought this house cash and used hard money or private money, I most likely would have lost money in this situation if all the circumstances were the same, with the time delays and the changes in our budget, all that stuff, just because of how much money we would have been bringing to the table, and our carrying costs would have been, well, probably 4 times as much as what it was in the structure that we had. We would have lost money on this deal. And so even when all things go wrong in a creative deal, you can still make a really good profit. And so I think that just shows how powerful creative finance can be, and still be a win-win for the buyer and the seller. And so I hope this was valuable to you to hear a little bit about the nuts and bolts on this deal. Stay tuned to the channel. We have a couple other rehabs coming up that I can't wait to share with you, as well as some other asset classes that we're looking to get into. We're looking at some RV parks, we're looking at multifamily, and also buying some businesses. So stay tuned to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next video. See ya.